Hey everyone, welcome back to CreepyCorner stories. You know, diving into the dark web is always risky, but sharing these stories with you makes it worth it. I'm curious, where are you watching this from right now? Let me know in the comments below. I've noticed that these kinds of stories hit differently depending on where you are. It might even make the experience a little creepier. So, tell me, are you watching from the safety of your home or somewhere less secure? A dark web stream claimed to show the truth about Santa Claus. What I saw happening at the North Pole wasn't for kids. Alright, before I even start, let me just say this. I'm not an idiot. I know all the rules. Don't go on the dark web unless you know what you're doing. Don't click weird links. Don't mess with live streams. But curiosity's a hell of a drug, man. And sometimes you just have to know. I'm a 21-year-old college kid, studying marketing, if you care. Pretty normal, I guess. But like most of you, I spend way too much time on the internet. I'm one of those guys who stays up till 3 a.m. watching weird YouTube videos or reading creepy Reddit threads. I love that kind of stuff. The spooky internet mysteries, urban legends, lost media, you name it. This whole thing started a few weeks ago. It was early December, and my campus was already decorated to the max. Fake snow everywhere, wreaths on every door, Mariah Carey blasting from every speaker. You know the deal. Christmas stuff was unavoidable. It was one of those freezing nights where it's too cold to leave the apartment. So I did what I always do. Got some McDonald's, curled up on my couch, and started scrolling Reddit. I'd been lurking on r/NTOSLEEP for a while when a post caught my eye. Don't watch the North Pole stream on the dark web. I'm serious. The post had maybe 10 upvotes. No one had commented yet. I clicked it. It was short. Just a couple sentences. There's a live feed of Santa's workshop on the dark web. If you find it, don't watch. It's not what you think it is. That was it. The account that posted it had already been deleted. Now, I don't know about you, but when someone says, "Don't look at this," it makes me want to look at it even more. At first, I figured it was just a troll post, but it stuck with me. A live feed of Santa's workshop on the dark web? That sounded so stupid it almost had to be fake. Or maybe it wasn't. Curiosity got the best of me. By now, it was past midnight, and I wasn't tired. The more I thought about it, the more I wanted to see this North Pole feed for myself. I told myself it was probably just a dumb prank, a live stream of someone's Christmas decorations, or an old VHS tape looping over and over, but still, I wanted to see it. Now, before you ask, yes, I know how to access the dark web. I'm not some hacker genius, but I've messed around on it before. I've got Tor browser. I use a VPN, and I only ever browse on this old burner laptop I keep for sketchy stuff. Trust me, you don't want to be on the deep web on your main computer. I set everything up, turned off all the lights in my apartment, and pulled up Tor. It didn't take long. I found a few forums where people were talking about Christmas feeds and Santa's workshop streams. Most of them were jokes or links to fake sites, but eventually I stumbled across something legit. It was a link buried in the comments of an obscure forum post, just a bunch of random letters and numbers. I copied it into Tor, hit enter, and waited. The screen went black. My heart started pounding a little. I kept telling myself it was probably nothing, maybe even a dead link. But then the video started. The stream. At first, the screen showed nothing but static. I almost closed it right then and there, but after a few seconds, the static cleared, and a video started playing. It opened on a snowy landscape. I'm talking about miles and miles of nothing but snow, flat and white, stretching all the way to the horizon. It was the kind of footage you'd see in a nature documentary, except there was no sound, not even wind. I stared at the screen, confused. Was this supposed to be Santa's workshop? And then the camera panned. In the distance, barely visible through the haze, I saw a building. It was massive, easily the size of a factory or a warehouse, but it didn't look festive at all. No bright lights, no colorful decorations, just a long gray structure with smokestacks rising out of the top. Dark smoke poured into the sky, like the place was running on coal. I leaned closer to my screen. The camera zoomed in on the front of the building, where there was a giant set of steel doors. Above them, painted in big red letters, were the words, Santa's Workshop. I swear to God, the paint looked like it was dripping. For a minute, nothing happened. The video just stayed there, locked on those doors, until they started to move. The doors opened. It wasn't a smooth movement either. The doors groaned like they were old and rusted, and as they slid open, the camera cut to black. I waited. My laptop fan started whirring like crazy, and I was half convinced the stream had crashed my system. But just as I reached for the power button, the feed came back. This time, the camera was inside the building. It looked like a factory. Conveyor belts ran in every direction, carrying boxes and crates toward shadowy corners of the room. The lighting was dim, mostly old, flickering bulbs that swung overhead, and the air looked heavy, like it was full of dust or smoke. And then I saw them. At first, I thought they were people in costumes. They were small, probably about 3 or 4 feet tall, and they wore green uniforms with little red hats. But something about them wasn't right. Their limbs were too thin, like wire hangers covered in skin, and their heads, I don't even know how to describe them. Their faces were covered with these masks, like creepy porcelain doll faces painted to look like happy little elves. The smiles were wide and crooked, and the eyes were just black, empty. They moved in unison, working on the conveyor belts, lifting boxes, shoving things inside, sealing crates. The camera zoomed in, and I swear I saw something moving inside one of the boxes. I blinked and leaned closer. Was that a toy? And then, as if it knew I was watching, one of the elves turned its head toward the camera. The mask was smiling, but I swear to God, I felt it staring at me. I shut the laptop so fast, I almost broke it. My hands were shaking. What the hell had I just watched? I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my couch with my burner laptop still closed, the screen staring back at me like it knew what I had seen. The glow of my phone lit up the room as I kept scrolling Reddit, searching for anyone who had mentioned the North Pole feed. Nothing new came up. It didn't make sense. It wasn't like other deep web myths where people would comment things like, "Yeah, I saw that too. It's insane." Number. It was like the stream didn't exist at all. Just that one deleted post I'd found hours earlier. But here's the thing. I couldn't stop thinking about it. That massive factory in the middle of the snowstorm. The elves, if you can even call them that. The way it looked so real. If this was a prank, it wasn't some cheap CGI trick made in a basement. This was something else. And I swear, when that masked elf turned toward the camera, it was like it knew I was watching. I thought about forgetting the whole thing, just chalking it up to another internet rabbit hole. I shouldn't have gone down. But then, at around 2 a.m., I got a notification on my laptop. The email. It was a burner email account I'd forgotten about, one I'd only used when poking around the dark web. Somehow, someone had found it. The subject line was blank, but the email contained a single message. Go back to the stream. They're waiting for you. Attached to the email was a new link. I didn't even breathe for a second. Who the hell was sending this? I hadn't told anyone about the stream, and the only way someone would know I'd watched it is if... I glanced around my dark apartment, suddenly feeling watched, paranoid. My blinds were closed, but it didn't matter. A part of me wanted to delete the email and throw the laptop out the window. But, like I said before, curiosity's a hell of a drug. I needed answers. I clicked the link. Besides Santa's workshop, the stream started instantly. No buffering, no static. This time, the camera was moving, like someone was walking through the factory, holding the camera at chest level. It was shaking slightly, and I could hear footsteps crunching on the ground. It wasn't snow, though. The ground inside the building looked wet, slushy, like something had melted and soaked into the concrete. The camera passed by rows of conveyor belts, and I noticed something new. The boxes were moving. They twitched and wobbled, like whatever was inside them was alive. At one point, the camera zoomed in on a crate, and I swear I saw tiny fingers poking through a hole in the cardboard. The music was back too, another warped Christmas song playing in the background. It was Deck the Halls, but the tempo was slowed to a crawl, and it sounded like it was coming from a broken music box. The masked elves were still there, working silently, lifting boxes, shoving things inside. I noticed one of them holding what looked like a stuffed bear, but as the camera got closer, I realized it wasn't a toy. The bear was twitching, its limbs jerking, like it was trying to move on its own. What the hell was this place? The camera turned a corner, and suddenly, the conveyor belts were gone. Instead, there was a long hallway. The lights flickered, casting strange shadows on the walls. As the camera moved down the hallway, I saw doors on either side, steel doors, each with a small, dirty window at the top. And on the doors, in thick black lettering, were words I didn't want to see. Naughty. The footsteps slowed. Whoever was holding the camera stopped in front of one of the doors. Slowly, the camera zoomed in on the window. At first, I couldn't see anything. It was pitch black inside. But then, something moved. A face, pale, sunken, eyes wide open, staring directly at the camera. Its mouth moved silently, like it was trying to scream but couldn't make a sound. I felt my stomach drop. That wasn't a doll or some fake prop. That was a person. The camera moved on, stepping past door after door, all labeled naughty. I couldn't see what was behind the others, but I heard faint noises as the camera walked by. Whispers, scratching, something that sounded like crying. And then the hallway ended. At the far end, there was a single door, larger than the others. Above it, written in the same dripping red paint as before, was one word: Santa. The Santa door. The footsteps stopped. For a moment, the camera just stayed there, pointed at the door. I could feel my heart pounding. I didn't want to know what was behind it, but at the same time, I had to know. Slowly, the door creaked open. The camera stepped inside. The room was massive, almost like a throne room. The walls were covered in thick, red curtains that looked damp, like they'd been soaked in something. At the far end of the room was a giant wooden chair, Santa's chair, but it wasn't the cheerful, cozy kind you see in malls. It looked more like a throne, carved out of dark wood and covered in chains. And sitting in the chair was him, Santa Claus. Or at least that's what it was supposed to be. The thing in the chair was massive, easily 7 feet tall, and dressed in a tattered red suit. Its beard was long and matted, yellowed like it hadn't been washed in years. But the worst part was the face. It wasn't jolly. It wasn't human. Its skin was pale and stretched tight over its skull, like it had been dead for days. Its eyes were black, deep, empty sockets that seemed to swallow the light. And its mouth, it was smiling. Wide, too wide. The lips were cracked, and the teeth were sharp, yellowed, and inhuman. The creature tilted its head, like it was looking directly at me through the screen. And then it spoke. Its voice was deep and slow, like it was speaking underwater. "Have you been good this year?" The screen cut to black. I slammed the laptop shut again. This time, I couldn't even breathe. My whole body felt cold, like the temperature in my apartment had dropped by 10 degrees. And then my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. It said, "He knows you're watching." I didn't move for what felt like an hour. I sat frozen on my couch, my phone still glowing with that single text. "He knows you're watching." At first, I convinced myself it was a coincidence, a prank. Someone must have been tracking me on that site, some hacker playing a cruel joke. It's the dark web. It's full of people who want to mess with you, right? That's what I wanted to believe. But deep down, I knew it wasn't a coincidence. It couldn't be. The way that thing, Santa, looked through the screen, it wasn't just a video. It felt personal, like it was aware of me, like it was watching back. I stared at the text, heart pounding. My first instinct was to delete it and shut my phone off, but my thumb hovered over the screen. I needed to know. I needed answers. So I did something stupid. I texted back. "Who is this?" The reply came almost immediately. "Come and see for yourself." Attached was a location pin. The location. I hesitated before opening the map. I told myself I wouldn't go. There was no way I was dumb enough to chase something like this. But I still had to see where the pin was dropped. I tapped the link. The map loaded, and the pin zoomed into view. I expected it to show some random spot in Russia, maybe Antarctica, somewhere ridiculously far away, where nothing could possibly exist. But no. The location was a small, abandoned lot on the outskirts of my town, less than 20 minutes away. I felt my stomach drop. My brain tried to come up with logical explanations. Maybe someone hacked my phone and was trying to mess with me. Maybe this was all just a setup. But why there? I'd driven past that lot before. It was an old industrial area, filled with crumbling warehouses and overgrown parking lots. The kind of place where you'd see graffiti and broken glass. But now, I couldn't stop thinking, what if it's connected to the stream? What if there's something there? Something real? I wish I could say I shut my phone off and went to bed. But I didn't. I grabbed my car keys, threw on a hoodie, and walked out into the freezing night. The warehouse, the drive, was quiet. Too quiet. It was almost 3 a.m., and the streets were empty, except for the occasional car passing by. I turned off my radio, my only company, the sound of my tires rolling over frozen pavement. When I finally pulled up to the lot, I felt like I'd driven straight into a horror movie. The place looked even worse than I remembered. The warehouse stood there, dark and looming, its windows shattered, and its metal siding rusted and peeling. A faint mist hung low to the ground, curling around my car as I killed the engine. The location pin was still glowing on my phone screen, leading me toward the warehouse entrance. My breath came out in shaky clouds as I stepped out of the car. The lot was dead silent, except for the wind rattling the broken windows. I don't know why I kept walking. I should have turned around and gotten the hell out of there. But something pulled me forward, like I wasn't fully in control anymore. The closer I got to the warehouse, the colder the air felt. Not normal cold either. Like the temperature had dropped 10 degrees the moment I stepped onto that lot. I could see my breath hanging in the air, thick and slow, as I approached the entrance. The door was already open, a few feet ajar, like someone had been waiting for me. Inside, I stepped through the doorway, and my shoes crunched on something soft. I looked down and saw snow inside the warehouse. It didn't make sense. The floor was covered in a thin layer of it, pristine and white, like it had fallen just minutes before I arrived. I moved deeper into the building, my footsteps echoing. The light from my phone flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing rusted machinery, broken pipes, and graffiti covering the walls. At first, it looked like any abandoned factory. But then I saw it. In the center of the warehouse, there was a chair. Not just any chair, a massive wooden throne, identical to the one I'd seen in the stream. The red paint on it looked fresh, still wet in places. Chains hung loosely from the armrests, and the wood itself seemed to pulse, like it was breathing. I stopped in my tracks, every instinct in my body screaming at me to run. But before I could move, I heard it. Footsteps. They came from behind me, slow and deliberate, crunching through the snow. I spun around, my flashlight beam jerking wildly, but there was nothing there. Just darkness. And then I heard a sound I'll never forget. A deep, guttural, ho ho ho. It came from the shadows, vibrating through the air like a low growl. My flashlight flickered, and I caught a glimpse of movement. A tall figure, too large to be human, just outside the edge of the light. "Who's there?" I managed to choke out. My voice sounded small and weak. The footsteps started again, coming closer. The thing stepped into the light, and I swear my heart stopped. It was him, the Santa from the stream. His massive frame loomed over me, his face hidden by shadows, except for the wide yellow-toothed grin that stretched across his face. His beard was tangled and filthy, and his suit, torn and stained, seemed to move on its own, like it was alive. He took another step toward me, and I felt my knees lock. My flashlight flickered, and for a split second I saw his eyes, black, empty pits that seemed to stare straight through me. "You've been very naughty," he said, his voice rumbling through the warehouse, like thunder. The light went out, the escape. I don't know how I managed to move, but I ran. I turned and sprinted toward the exit, my breath ragged and my heart pounding so hard it felt like it would explode. Behind me, I heard heavy footsteps, faster now, thudding against the ground, shaking the walls of the warehouse. I didn't dare look back. I burst through the door and into the freezing night, my feet slipping on the snow as I ran for my car. The footsteps followed me all the way to the edge of the lot, but as soon as I crossed it, they stopped. Dead silence. I fumbled with my keys, threw myself into the car, and locked the doors. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely get the engine to start. I looked in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see that thing standing in the doorway. But the warehouse was empty. I didn't waste any time. I floored the gas and sped out of there, not stopping until I was back at my apartment. When I finally collapsed onto my bed, I realized I was still clutching my phone. The location pin was gone, and the text thread had disappeared, like it had never been there at all. The days after that night were different. I didn't tell anyone what happened. Who would believe me that I watched some cursed stream, drove to an abandoned warehouse, and saw something that looked like Santa Claus, but wasn't remotely human? Yeah, no one's buying that. But I knew something had changed. It started with small things, subtle but wrong. I'd hear the faint creak of footsteps in my apartment late at night when I knew I was alone. My lights would flicker, even though the wiring in my place was fine. But the worst was the cold. It didn't matter how high I turned the heat up. My apartment was freezing. I'd wake up shivering in the middle of the night, seeing my breath hang in the air like it was 20 degrees inside. I kept telling myself it was just paranoia, that I was psyching myself out after everything that happened. But then I started seeing him. The mall Santa. About a week after the warehouse incident, I was driving to grab coffee. The holiday season was in full swing, and traffic was brutal. Every store I passed was packed with people shopping for gifts, Christmas music blaring from every corner. At a red light, I glanced out my window at a shopping center. There was a little setup for a mall Santa out front, a big red throne, a candy cane striped backdrop, and a guy in a Santa suit surrounded by families and kids. Normal, right? But then the Santa looked up. He wasn't waving at the kids or smiling for pictures. He was staring directly at me. His face was pale, stretched too tight over his cheeks, and his smile, it was wide, way too wide. The light turned green, and I didn't move. I couldn't. I just sat there, staring back at him. He raised one hand, slow and deliberate, and pointed right at me. I snapped out of it when someone honked behind me, and I floored it. I didn't look back. The live stream returns. That night, I stayed up late, trying to distract myself with Netflix and Reddit. My brain felt fried, like I was running on autopilot. Around 1 a.m., my laptop dinged. It was an email. My stomach dropped. The subject line read, "Still watching?" I didn't want to open it, but I did. There was no message, just another link. It looked almost identical to the first one, random characters strung together. But this time, there was a single word beneath it. Tonight. I slammed the laptop shut, my heart pounding. I was done with this. I wasn't going to click that link. I wasn't going to watch. But then I noticed something. My phone screen was lit up. A notification. Live North Pole stream. It wasn't a text or an email. It was a push notification, like the ones you'd get from YouTube or Instagram. But I didn't subscribe to anything like that. I didn't even know how it got on my phone. The app icon was just a black square with white text that said live. I tapped it. The stream loaded instantly. The feed was different. This time, at first, it looked the same. The inside of Santa's workshop. The conveyor belts were running, and the masked elves moved mechanically, assembling whatever it was they were working on. But there were no toys this time. The camera zoomed in on the conveyor belt, and I saw a box roll past. It wasn't a crate this time. It was a gift box, neatly wrapped with red ribbon. A tag hung off the side. I squinted, leaning closer to the screen, and my stomach turned. The tag had my name on it. Suddenly, the camera cut to a new angle. The long hallway, the one with the naughty doors, was back. But this time, the camera wasn't moving on its own. It was being held by someone. The footsteps were faster now, more purposeful. As the camera moved down the hall, my breath caught in my throat. The camera stopped in front of a door. The name painted on it wasn't naughty this time. It was my name. He's here. My blood ran cold. I slammed the laptop shut again, but the audio didn't stop. My speakers kept playing the sound of footsteps, slow, heavy thuds echoing in my apartment. I felt like I was losing my mind. I unplugged the laptop and yanked out the battery, but the noise didn't stop. And then I heard it. The footsteps weren't coming from my laptop anymore. They were coming from my hallway. I froze, listening. My apartment was dead silent, except for that slow, heavy sound. The footsteps stopped just outside my bedroom door. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Then, in the darkness, I heard a voice, deep, rumbling, and too close. "You've been very naughty." My bedroom door creaked open. The escape. I don't know how I managed to move, but I did. I grabbed my phone and bolted for the window. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I unlocked the window, shoved it open, and climbed out onto the fire escape. Behind me, I heard heavy footsteps crossing my bedroom floor, followed by a low, guttural laugh. "Ho! Ho! Ho!" I scrambled down the fire escape as fast as I could. I didn't stop running until I was 3 blocks away, standing on a street corner under a flickering streetlight, trying to catch my breath. When I finally looked back at my apartment, the window to my room was dark, but I could see a silhouette standing just inside, tall, broad-shouldered, and wearing a red suit. He was staring at me. Nowhere is safe. I haven't gone back to my apartment since. I'm crashing on a friend's couch, but I haven't told them the truth. How do you explain something like this? That Santa Claus, or whatever that thing is real, and it's hunting me. But here's the worst part. It doesn't matter where I go. Everywhere I've been, I've started seeing him. Mall Santas, Christmas ads on billboards, even those stupid decorations outside grocery stores. Every time I see one, they're staring at me. Yesterday, I was in line at Starbucks when I heard the faint sound of bells jingling behind me. I turned around, and there he was, a Santa, standing just outside the window, his face hidden behind a wide, twisted smile. He raised one hand and waved. I haven't slept in days. I'm afraid that if I close my eyes, he'll be there when I wake up, and I keep hearing it, no matter where I go. Faint, distant, and getting closer. Ho, 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 ho. I can't run from him anymore. No matter where I go, he finds me. It's not just my apartment. It's everywhere. It's the dark corners of grocery stores, the shadows behind Christmas decorations. I see him in mall Santas, in posters, and even in stupid TikTok ads where someone's dancing in a Santa suit. They all look at me just a little too long, just long enough to make my stomach twist. It's not random. It's him. Every night I hear the same thing. Footsteps outside wherever I'm staying. A slow, deliberate sound, like someone wearing heavy boots, moving one step at a time. I try not to listen. I try to drown it out, but then comes the laugh. Low, broken, rumbling. Ho, ho, ho. It's like a nightmare I can't wake up from. Last night something happened that I can't ignore. The present. I was staying at my friend Rob's place. I hadn't told him the truth. Just made up some excuse about my apartment flooding and needing a place to crash for a couple of nights. Rob's cool. He didn't ask questions, but I think he knew something was wrong. I wasn't sleeping. I was paranoid. I jumped every time I heard bells, whether it was an ad on TV or a distant jingle outside. I felt like I was losing my mind. Around midnight, I was lying on the couch, staring at the ceiling, when I heard something outside the door. A thud, like a box being dropped. I froze. Rob was asleep upstairs, and I knew he hadn't ordered anything, The thud was followed by the faintest jingle of bells. So quiet, I almost thought I imagined it. My chest tightened. Slowly, I got up and moved to the front door. I didn't open it. I just stood there, staring at it, holding my breath. Through the peephole, I saw a box, a perfectly wrapped present, sitting alone on the doorstep. It was wrapped in red paper, tied with a green ribbon, and had a tag hanging off the side. I didn't need to open the door to know what the tag said. I cracked the door open just enough to grab the box and pulled it inside, my heart racing. I don't know why I touched it. I should have left it there, but I needed to see. I placed the box on the coffee table and stared at it, afraid to tear the paper. The tag read, "To you from Santa." My hands were shaking as I untied the ribbon. The box was heavier than I expected, and when I finally peeled back the paper, I wished I hadn't. Inside was an old, handheld camera. It looked ancient, like something from the early 2000s. Scratched plastic casing, a dirty lens, and a little screen that was dark and smudged. I picked it up with trembling hands and turned it over. There was a sticker on the back. Someone had written on it in red marker, "Recording." I clicked the power button. The screen flickered to life. The camera was still recording. The footage. I lifted the camera to my face, staring at the screen. At first, it was black, just static and shadows. I thought maybe it was broken, but then something moved. The footage showed a hallway. My hallway. The perspective was low, like the camera was being held by someone short or crouching. It moved slowly down the hall, the faint sound of breathing coming through the tiny speakers. I watched, frozen, as the camera turned to face a door. My door. It paused for a moment, then pushed the door open. The angle shifted, revealing my empty bedroom. My bed was unmade, the covers rumpled from the night I ran. And then the camera turned, and I swear to God, it looked like someone was holding it, in real time. Like someone was standing there, recording me as I watched the screen. That's when I heard it. Footsteps, not on the camera. Behind me, the visitor. I dropped the camera. It hit the ground with a crack, but I didn't care. The footsteps were coming from the kitchen, slow and deliberate, like someone walking in heavy boots. Crunch, crunch. I grabbed the closest thing I could, a metal lamp from the corner of the room, and held it in front of me like a weapon. My pulse was pounding in my ears. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't stop myself. The footsteps stopped just out of sight, right at the edge of the room. For a moment, everything was silent. Then I heard the voice, low, deep, close. "Have you been good this year?" I swung the lamp. The light crashed to the floor, shattering, and the room plunged into darkness. I scrambled to turn on my phone flashlight, but the beam barely cut through the shadows. That's when I saw him. In the corner of the room, just outside the reach of the light, a figure stood still as a statue. It was tall, almost too tall to fit under the ceiling. Its shoulders were hunched, its red suit torn and hanging off its massive frame. I could see the glint of yellow teeth curled into a grin. Its voice came again, louder this time, vibrating the walls. "Naughty!" It lunged. The truth about Santa. I don't remember running. I don't remember grabbing my keys or stumbling out into the freezing night. The next thing I knew, I was in my car, speeding down empty streets with no destination in mind. My hands were shaking on the wheel, my face frozen from the wind. But as I drove, I started seeing him again. On every street corner, in every window, Santas, dozens of them, standing motionless, their heads turning to follow my car as I passed. Some were wearing cheap mall costumes. Others looked more real. They all had the same grin. I don't know where I am right now. I've been driving for hours, trying to put distance between myself and him. But I know it doesn't matter. You can't outrun him. That's the truth about Santa. He doesn't come to reward the good kids. He comes for the naughty ones. And he's not jolly. He's not kind. He's old, older than Christmas, older than all of us. And he sees everything. He's coming for me. I know it. Maybe he's coming for you too. So if you hear bells jingling outside your window or footsteps in the middle of the night, don't look. Don't go searching for answers. And for the love of God, whatever you do, don't watch the stream. Ho, ho, ho. I joined a dark web forum discussing a secret NASA mission. The photos showed a cave on Mars with something looking out. Okay, so I need to start by saying I'm not some deep web hacker or one of those guys who knows how to unlock the internet. I'm just a pretty average 22-year-old guy who spends too much time online and has an unhealthy obsession with weird stuff. Conspiracies, cryptids, urban legends, all of that. You know the type. I'm not proud of it, but Reddit, YouTube, and Discord servers basically own me. This whole thing started about a month ago when my roommate, Will, and I were having one of those late-night deep dives on conspiracy forums. It started normal enough, discussing stuff like the moon landing hoax and ancient aliens. But then Will mentioned something that stuck with me. He said, "You know NASA doesn't release everything they find, right? Like, there's stuff they've probably discovered in space that they don't tell us about, things we shouldn't see." Now, I'm not usually one to put on a tinfoil hat, but it got me thinking, what if? So I started looking. I Googled, watched videos, and browsed every Reddit thread about NASA conspiracies. But it was mostly old junk. At some point, I stumbled across this post in r/unresolved mysteries talking about NASA's archives being scrubbed clean before anything gets out to the public. Someone in the comments mentioned this hidden dark web forum called the Obsidian Horizon, where people claim to leak insider information, stuff like classified space discoveries and government projects. I know, it sounds fake, but the internet is a weird place. People fake everything, but sometimes, just sometimes, something feels too real. I'm not going to give details on how I got there. Let's just say YouTube tutorials exist, but I found it. The Obsidian Horizon. It wasn't what I expected. No flashy skull graphics or people typing in ominous binary code. It was just a basic black and white forum, bare bones. The tagline at the top read, "Beyond the horizon, we are not alone." Creepy, right? Most of the threads were nonsense. People posting grainy UFO photos or fake alien autopsy videos. But one thread caught my attention because it had only been posted 20 minutes earlier. The title, "Cave on Mars, Leaked Images from Cydonia Region, 2018 NASA Mission." I clicked on it. The user who posted it was named NILREM and had 0 post history. The thread had no replies yet, just a single text block. They took this mission offline. I used to work for a subcontractor handling post-mission data. There are things we weren't supposed to see. If anyone finds this, know that they are hiding the truth. Scroll at your own risk. Below the text were 3 images attached, all labeled MRO_2018 something, like NASA Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter files. I hesitated for a minute before clicking on the first one. I don't know what I expected But it wasn't this. The image was a high-res photo of the Martian surface. Red rocks, jagged cliffs, all the stuff you've seen a million times in NASA photos. But in the middle of the frame was this dark hole at the base of a ridge. It looked like a cave, circular, pitch black, and perfectly unnatural. The second image was closer, zoomed in on the same cave. This one made my stomach drop. Something was there. I don't even know how to describe it, because it didn't make sense to my brain. It looked like two pale, glowing eyes peering out of the darkness, too far apart and too big to belong to anything human. The third image? It was grainier, almost like a screen grab from a video. The cave looked closer, and the eyes were gone, but there were faint scratch marks in the Martian dirt, leading away from the cave mouth, like something had crawled out. I stared at the screen for a solid minute before snapping back to reality. My heart was pounding, and I felt genuinely uneasy, like I'd seen something I wasn't supposed to. I saved the images onto a flash drive because I'm dumb and curious. Before I left the thread, I noticed something weird. The post had over 300 views already, but no replies. Then I refreshed the page, and the thread was just gone, deleted. I showed Will the photos the next morning, expecting him to laugh, but he didn't. He just stared at them, his face pale. "Dude, what is this?" he asked. "I found them last night. Some weird forum. This isn't fake, man. Look at the quality. This looks like actual NASA stuff." He was right. I know deep down that it's probably some kind of hoax, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the images were real. I've never seen a hoax that felt like that. Will and I decided to do some digging. After showing the images to Will, we both fell into this weird, almost obsessive state. It wasn't like a casual, "Hey, let's look into this because it's cool" thing. It was more like a gnawing feeling in the back of my brain. You know, when something doesn't make sense, and the harder you try to ignore it, the worse it gets. Yeah, that. Will spent the entire day on his laptop, while I scoured Reddit, Discord servers, even Twitter threads. I didn't expect to find much, but apparently there were rumors about a failed NASA mission to Mars in 2018, one that wasn't officially announced. Supposedly, they sent a probe to the Cydonia region. Yes, that Cydonia, the place with the famous Face on Mars photo. But for whatever reason, the mission was scrubbed, and all data was wiped clean. Most people wrote it off as nonsense, like a bunch of UFO nuts trying to build a conspiracy out of nothing. But someone out there knew something real. It didn't hit me until late that night, when I decided to reverse image search the photos, just to see if they were old hoaxes. You know what came up? Nothing. Not a single match. I used every tool I could think of. Google Lens, TinEye, even some sketchy dark web search engines. And still, there was nothing. "Bro, this is weird," I said to Will, who was practically hunched over his screen like Gollum. "You're telling me?" He paused. "Look at this." He turned his laptop around, and my stomach dropped. He'd found a tweet thread from a former NASA engineer named Dr. Stanley Hume. The account was locked and had like 40 followers, but the thread was still up. It was from 2019 and read, "There are reasons the public doesn't see everything we find. Sometimes it's better not to know. There are things that watch us back." One of the replies asked for clarification, and Dr. Hume just said, "We stopped looking in Cydonia for a reason." After that, his account went dark. No tweets, no retweets, Nothing. Just silence. Will and I stared at each other. I mean, he could just be a crazy old dude, right? I said. Maybe. Will frowned. But you know what's weirder? I tried to find any papers or work by him. He's gone, like scrubbed off the internet. It's like he never existed. At this point, the rational part of my brain was screaming at me to stop, but the other part, the one that makes you peek through your fingers during a horror movie, wouldn't let go. So we did the dumbest thing possible. We uploaded the images to a private Discord server we shared with a few friends. Guys, what the hell is this? Will posted, attaching the 3 photos. Our buddy Tyler responded almost immediately. Cool fake NASA pics, lol. Where'd you get 'em? Somewhere you're not supposed to go, Will typed back. Tyler didn't reply after that. Not for hours. Around 3 a.m., I got a text notification, and I swear my heart skipped a beat because Tyler had sent me a DM. The message was short, but it sent chills down my spine. Delete those pics. I'm serious. Stop looking. What the hell was that supposed to mean? I tried calling him, but he didn't pick up. I even messaged him on Instagram, but nothing. Just silence. Maybe he's messing with us, Will said, trying to sound calm, but he looked freaked out too. Yeah, maybe. Neither of us slept that night. The next day, I decided to see if I could find out anything about the user who posted the photos in the first place. NILREM. I searched for the username everywhere. Reddit, dark web forums, Twitter, and even Facebook. Nothing. It was like the dude popped into existence just long enough to post the images and then vanished. But then something happened that still gives me chills. Around 2 p.m., while I was scrolling through another random conspiracy forum, I got a notification that someone was trying to airdrop a file to my phone. Now, I don't live in a crowded area, and my phone's airdrop is set to contacts only, so this shouldn't have been possible. But the name of the sender sent goosebumps down my arms. NILREM. I just stared at it for a second, my thumb hovering over the decline button. But before I could react, the notification disappeared, and it felt like all the air had been sucked out of the room. Will, I called out, my voice shaking. He ran in from the kitchen. What? What happened? I held up my phone. Someone tried to airdrop me something. Same name as the guy who posted the pictures. Will turned white. Dude, turn your phone off. Now. I did, and we both sat in silence for a long time. Neither of us wanted to admit it, but we were both starting to feel like we were in way over our heads. That night, I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing on my desk. I'd forgotten to turn it back on airplane mode before I fell asleep. I grabbed it, squinting at the screen. It was a message. No sender, no number, just a single sentence. Stop looking, or it will find you. And attached to the message was a new photo. My hands were shaking as I opened it. It was another image of the cave, but this one was different. The eyes were closer now, glowing faintly, and the scratch marks leading out of the cave were deeper, like something heavy had dragged itself forward, and at the bottom of the image was a date, July 7th, 2024. I checked the calendar. That's only a month from now. I don't know what the hell is happening, but I've never been more scared in my life. I deleted the photo, smashed the flash drive with a hammer, and told Will we needed to stop. But it feels like it's already too late. Something is out there, and it knows we're looking. After that text, things started feeling wrong. I'm talking paranoia level wrong. You know when you feel like someone's watching you, but you can't see them? or when you're home alone and swear you hear footsteps in another room. That kind of wrong. The night after the message, I couldn't sleep. Every sound, pipes creaking, the hum of the fridge, distant traffic, felt amplified. Will wasn't any better. I caught him pacing the living room at 2 a.m. He turned to me when I walked in, his face pale. "You feel it too, right?" he asked. "Feel what?" He didn't answer right away. "Like we're being watched." I didn't say anything, because I did feel it. The next day, we both tried to go about life as usual. Will went to class. He's finishing up his degree. And I dragged myself to my part-time job at a local Starbucks. I thought maybe, just maybe, getting out of the apartment would help clear my head. It didn't. I was restocking the fridge in the back when my manager Zoe called me up front. She looked annoyed. "Hey, can you deal with that guy? He's been sitting there for hours, hasn't ordered anything, and he keeps staring at the counter." I frowned. "What guy?" Zoe pointed. I looked across the cafe and immediately felt ice creep up my spine. There was a man sitting at one of the corner tables. His back was straight, hands folded on the table in front of him, and he wasn't moving, just staring. He was wearing this oversized black hoodie with the hood up, and I swear to God, I couldn't see his face. It wasn't like he was in shadow. It was like his face just wasn't there. My brain couldn't process it, like when you tried to look at something blurry. Yeah, I'll talk to him," I muttered. As I walked over, the closer I got, the weirder it felt. My chest got heavy, like the air around him was different. When I was about 5 feet away, I stopped. "Hey man," I said, trying to sound normal. "You need to order something if you're gonna hang out here." Nothing. He didn't move. "Sir?" Still nothing. I took a step closer, and then he turned his head, just slightly, enough for me to see something. It wasn't a face. It was static, like the kind you see on an old TV, just a mess of white noise where his features should have been. And somehow, I knew, I felt that he was looking at me. I stumbled back, my heart hammering in my chest. I turned around to grab Zoe, but when I looked back at the corner table, he was gone. Just gone, like he'd never been there. The chair was still pulled out, and on the table sat something small and metallic. I stepped closer, my hands shaking. It was an SD card. I didn't touch it. I grabbed Zoe and told her some guy left trash on the table, and she tossed it without a second thought. But the whole time, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd messed up, that the SD card was meant for me. When I got home, Will was sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the TV. Static filled the screen. No audio, just pure white noise. "Will?" I said softly. No response. I walked over and shook him, and he snapped out of it like he'd just woken up from a bad dream. "Dude, what the hell?" I asked. He blinked at me. What time is it?" 5. "What are you doing?" He looked at the TV, his face going pale. I don't know. I don't remember turning it on." I grabbed the remote and turned the TV off, but the static lingered in my head like an afterimage. That night, Will and I made a pact. We weren't going to look into the cave anymore. We weren't going to talk about the photos or the text or the weird guy at Starbucks. We'd act like none of it ever happened. We tried. But whatever this thing is, it didn't want to be ignored. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to the sound of something moving in the apartment. I froze, holding my breath, listening. The noises were soft, shuffling, like footsteps dragging across the floor. "Will?" I whispered. No answer. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding, and looked at my door. Light from the hallway spilled in underneath, and then I saw it. Shadows. Not one, but two. They passed by my door slowly, stopping just long enough for me to know they were there. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The shadows disappeared, and a few seconds later, my phone buzzed on my nightstand. I grabbed it with shaking hands and looked at the screen. It was another text. "It's coming for you." Attached was a photo. This time, it wasn't Mars. It was my apartment, taken from outside my window. I don't live on the ground floor. I ran into Will's room and practically shook him awake. "Someone's in the apartment." Will grabbed a bat he kept under his bed, and we went room to room, checking closets, under the couch, even the locked windows. Nothing. The apartment was empty, but on the kitchen counter, we found something that hadn't been there before. The SD card. We didn't sleep that night. We didn't talk. We just sat in the living room, staring at the SD card like it was a live bomb. Around 6 a.m., as the sun started coming up, Will finally spoke. "We need to see what's on it." I wanted to say no. I wanted to burn the damn thing and forget any of this ever happened. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this was the only way to stop whatever was happening. We grabbed an old laptop Will had lying around. No way were we using one of ours, and inserted the card. There was only one file, a video labeled MRO, final.mp4. Will clicked it. The video started with static. Then it cut to footage of the Martian cave, the same one from the photos. But this time, the camera was moving, like someone was walking toward it. The cave got closer and closer until the entrance filled the screen. And then, something stepped out. I couldn't see it clearly, but it was tall, its limbs impossibly thin, and it moved with this jerky, unnatural motion. The screen flickered, and for a split second, its face came into view. It wasn't static this time. It was me. The video cut to black. Will slammed the laptop shut, breathing hard. "What the hell was that?" Before I could answer, my phone buzzed again. Another text. July 7th, 2024. We're running out of time. I didn't sleep for the next 2 days. Neither did Will. We tried to pretend everything was fine. But when something like this crawls into your life, you don't just shake it off. It seeps into the cracks. It becomes all you can think about. Every little thing felt off. Cars parked too long outside our building. A stranger on the bus staring just a second too long. My phone would buzz, but when I checked, there'd be nothing. No texts, no calls, no notifications. Just nothing. The worst part? The date, July 7th, 2024, was getting closer. I couldn't stop thinking about it. Like whatever this was, whatever we had stumbled into, was leading us towards something we couldn't escape. On the third night, something happened that broke me. Will and I had decided we needed answers. The video, MRO, final.mp4, had shown us just enough to make us desperate to know more. Whatever that thing was, it wasn't human. It wasn't from here. But why did it show my face? We sat in the dark, staring at the old laptop we'd watched the video on. The screen was still black, the SD card still inside. Will broke the silence. "We should post it somewhere. See if someone else knows what it is." "You want to spread this?" I snapped. "You saw what it did to us. What if someone can help us?" Will shot back. I didn't have an argument for that. I didn't have anything. I just sat there, feeling the weight of my exhaustion pressing down on me. Finally, I nodded. "Fine." We uploaded the video to a small conspiracy Discord server we'd found during our digging. Just like before, we kept it private. No public posts, no exposure to anyone who didn't already swim in this part of the internet. The reactions were immediate. WTF is this? That's not CGI. Did you film this? Where was this taken? Why is the face? But the most unsettling message came from a user with no profile picture, no username, just a blank space where their name should have been. You shouldn't have shown them. I froze. Will, look. We both stared at the message as it lingered there, somehow heavier than the rest. Then, without warning, the screen glitched. The Discord server froze, the text distorting into blocks of black and white. For a second, I thought the laptop had crashed. Then the static started. It was faint at first, like a whisper, but it got louder. The laptop speakers hissed with white noise, a garbled hum that clawed at my ears. Will grabbed the mouse, trying to close the window, but the screen wouldn't respond. And then, something changed. The static shifted. The sound became words. You see, you see, you see. And for a second, just a second, the face appeared on the screen. My face. The same blurry, distorted version we'd seen in the video. But this time, it smiled. I slammed the laptop shut, my chest heaving. Will sat frozen beside me, his face pale. What the hell is happening? I whispered. Will didn't answer. He just pointed to the corner of the room. I followed his gaze, and my blood ran cold. There was a shadow on the wall, a tall, thin shadow, and it was moving. We ran. I don't remember grabbing my shoes or my keys. I don't even remember locking the door. Will and I sprinted out of the apartment and into the parking lot, like the devil himself was behind us. Will fumbled with his car keys, his hands shaking. Get in, get in. I yanked the passenger door open, and we both dove inside. Will turned the engine, and for a second, I thought the car wouldn't start. The headlights flickered as the engine coughed to life, and that's when I saw it. At the edge of the lot, just beyond the reach of the headlights, it stood there, tall, thin, its limbs too long, its head tilted just slightly to one side. I couldn't see its face, but I knew. It was watching us. Will slammed his foot on the gas. We drove for hours, no destination, no plan, just away. The roads were empty, dark, and the longer we drove, the less I felt like we were escaping anything. It was like the thing was following us, even if we couldn't see it. At some point, we ended up at a 24-hour diner off the highway. The place was empty except for a tired-looking waitress and some trucker drinking coffee in the corner. We sat in a booth, shaking and silent. The waitress came over, smacking gum and holding a notepad. "What can I get you, boys?" I opened my mouth to answer, but before I could say anything, I heard it. The static. It was faint, like it was coming from far away. But it was there. I looked around the diner, my hands going clammy. The sound seemed to be coming from the jukebox in the corner. It wasn't playing music, just soft, low, white noise. I looked at Will. "Do you hear that?" He nodded, his eyes wide. The waitress raised an eyebrow. "You guys okay?" Will grabbed my arm. "We need to go." I didn't argue. We tossed some cash on the table and bolted. When we got back in the car, my phone buzzed. Another text. "You cannot run." This time, it was a photo of the diner, taken from outside the window. "We're out of options. We can't go home. We can't go anywhere without feeling like we're being followed. Will wants to drive out to the middle of nowhere and destroy everything. The SD card, the laptop, even our phones. I'm starting to think he's right, but part of me knows it won't matter. Whatever this is, whatever we've uncovered, it isn't going to stop, and July 7th is less than 2 weeks away. I don't think we're going to make it that far. Will and I drove until the gas gauge hit empty. Neither of us said a word as we pulled off the highway, ending up on a dirt road in the middle of nowhere. It was just fields and forests as far as I could see. No lights, no houses, nothing. Will killed the engine and slumped forward, resting his head on the steering wheel. "This is it," he muttered. "We're off the grid. We destroy everything, and maybe it'll stop." I didn't argue. I didn't have the energy. We dragged the laptop, the SD card, and our phones out of the car. Will grabbed the baseball bat from the trunk, and we took turns smashing everything to pieces. The crack of plastic and glass echoed in the emptiness around us. Every swing felt like a step toward freedom, like maybe if we shattered these things, we could shatter whatever had latched onto us. When we were done, the remains of our digital lives were scattered across the dirt like broken bones. Will poured gas over the mess, flicked a match, and we watched it burn. The fire ate away at the twisted plastic and melted screens, smoke curling up into the dark sky. For the first time in days, I felt like we were taking control. I turned to Will. "Do you think it's enough?" Will didn't answer. He was staring past me, into the dark trees that bordered the road. "Will?" I whispered. He raised his hand, pointing. "There." I followed his gaze, and my stomach dropped. Between the trees, I saw it. The shape, tall and thin, its limbs too long, its head tilted unnaturally to one side. It wasn't moving. It was just standing there, watching us. And then, it stepped forward. I grabbed Will's arm. "We need to go." Now we ran to the car, hearts pounding. But when Will turned the key, the engine wouldn't start. He tried again. Click, click, click. Nothing. "Come on," Will shouted, slamming the steering wheel. I looked out the window, my breath catching in my throat. The thing was closer now, standing just a few yards from the car. For the first time, I could see its face clearly, and when I did, my brain short-circuited. It wasn't a face. It was a swirling mass of static, like a broken TV, flickering and twisting into impossible shapes. I couldn't look away. My head started pounding, my ears ringing, like the sound of white noise was crawling inside me. Will grabbed my shoulder. "Get out! We're running for it!" We flung the doors open and sprinted into the field. I didn't dare look back. I could feel it following us, closing the distance. The sound of static grew louder and louder, buzzing in my skull, until I thought my head was going to split open. I don't know how long we ran. My lungs burned. My legs felt like lead, but we didn't stop. Eventually, we stumbled onto an old barn at the edge of the field. The wood was rotting, the door hanging crooked, but we didn't care. We shoved our way inside and collapsed on the dirt floor, gasping for breath. "Is it gone?" I wheezed. Will didn't answer. He was staring at his phone, which shouldn't have been possible because we'd just burned it. "Will, where did you?" He held it up. The screen was static, flickering violently, and then the text appeared, letter by letter, like something was typing it in real time. "It's time." The static on the phone grew louder, filling the barn like a hurricane. My ears rang, and I clamped my hands over them, but it didn't help. The sound was inside me, rattling through my skull. Will screamed. I looked up just in time to see him drop the phone, clutching his head as blood started trickling from his nose. The static intensified, a high-pitched wail that made my vision blur. And then the door creaked open. The thing stepped inside. I don't remember much of what happened next. I remember the static filling my mind, a screech so loud it blocked out everything else. I remember its face, or what I thought was its face, hovering inches from mine. The white noise swallowed me whole, and for a second, I felt like I was floating in nothingness. Then, silence. I woke up to sunlight streaming through the cracks in the barn. My head ached and my mouth was dry. I sat up slowly, my body sore like I'd been hit by a truck. "Will?" I croaked. No answer. I turned to where he'd been sitting, but he was gone. There was no blood, no sign that he'd ever been there at all, except for the phone. It sat in the dirt, screen dark, dead. I picked it up with trembling hands, expecting to see static, but there was nothing, just a black screen. I stumbled out of the barn, into the open field. The car was gone. The dirt road was gone. The trees were gone. There was nothing. Just red dirt and jagged cliffs stretching out as far as I could see. It took me a moment to realize what I was looking at. The sky was dark and cloudless, tinged with an unnatural crimson glow. The air felt thin, burning my lungs with every breath. I turned in slow circles, my heart pounding, and then I saw it. The cave, the same cave from the photos. It was right in front of me, a black hole in the side of a massive ridge. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Something moved inside the darkness. Two pale, glowing eyes blinked open, staring back at me. And then, I woke up in my apartment. I was lying on my bed, fully dressed, with no memory of how I got there. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. I picked it up with shaking hands and looked at the screen. July 7th, 2024. The date. It's today. I don't know what's real anymore. Will is gone. No one remembers him. The barn, the road, the cave. I don't know if any of it happened, or if I've lost my mind. But I keep hearing the static, faint and far away, like it's waiting. There's something outside my window right now. I haven't looked, but I know it's there. I don't think I'm coming back from this. If you're reading this, do one thing for me. Don't look for it. Don't search for the photos. Don't go digging where you don't belong. Some things were never meant to be seen. I hacked into a live dark web red room. The victim looked at the camera, whispered my name, and smiled. All right, I know everyone says this, but I swear I'm not the type of guy who goes looking for trouble. I'm just a 21-year-old college student, the kind of guy you see in hoodies at Starbucks, pounding out late-night essays while inhaling a venti cold brew. Like a lot of people, I've always been fascinated by horror stories, creepy internet legends, and the kind of stuff you find on YouTube at 2 a.m. when you can't sleep. Ghost videos, unsolved mysteries, and yeah, deep web stories. The thing is, most of those stories sound so far-fetched, you can't help but think they're fake. Red rooms? You've probably heard the term, thrown around in creepy Reddit threads or animated horror videos. It's this infamous concept of a live stream where people supposedly pay obscene amounts of cryptocurrency to watch someone get tortured, or worse. It's one of those things you joke about at sleepovers, like, haha, imagine accidentally finding one of those on the dark web. Well, let me tell you this. I used to think it was all urban legend too, until I found something I wish I could unsee. So, let me set the stage for you. This happened last fall, around mid-November. My roommates, Jake and Caleb, had gone out for drinks because Jake had just broken up with his girlfriend of 3 years, and apparently, tequila was the answer. I wasn't in the mood for crowded bars and crying bros, so I stayed back at the apartment. It was one of those perfect lazy nights where the place is all yours. I'd ordered a large pepperoni pizza, grabbed a monster from the fridge, and parked myself at my desk with my dual monitors glowing in the dark. One screen had YouTube playing some mindless horror documentary. The other had my coding project for class, a project I was fully ignoring. You know how it goes when you start clicking deeper and deeper into YouTube's recommended videos. You start with something basic, like 10 creepy facts about abandoned places, and next thing you know, it's 1 a.m. and you're watching 5 real Red Room stories that will haunt you. That's where I ended up. The video was just a typical compilation, but something about the way the narrator said Red Rooms got under my skin. I leaned back in my chair, chewing on a crust of pizza, and thought, why not mess around on the deep web? I'd done it before, and it was never anything crazy, just sketchy marketplaces selling fake IDs or weird, abandoned forums. Here's the thing about the dark web. Getting on it isn't as dramatic as it sounds. You download a browser called Tor, which lets you visit websites with .onion addresses, basically sites that don't show up on Google. It's not illegal to browse, but it's sketchy as hell because it's unregulated. You have no idea who or what you're interacting with. Anyway, I pulled up Tor and started going through my old bookmarks. I had a folder labeled Creepy Crap that I'd saved over the past year. Dead forums, puzzle sites, random archives of banned books. I wasn't expecting much. Usually, these places are deserted or filled with nonsense. But after about 20 minutes of clicking through links, I found something new. It was a forum called Hidden Answers. Picture Reddit, but with a plain black background, white text, and no rules. People posted threads asking for drug dealers, illegal services, and yes, live streams. Most of the posts were boring, people looking to buy fake passports or hacking software. But one thread caught my eye immediately. Live event starting tonight. Real feed. Do you dare to watch? The post had been made an hour earlier, and there were already a few replies. User 666. Link works. Don't watch unless you can handle it. Shadow 99. Is it real? How much tonight? Guess 24. Proof or GTFO. Underneath the comments was a short, messy-looking link. It wasn't a normal URL. It was a string of random letters and numbers ending in .onion. Now, I'd like to say I hesitated, that I saw the warning signs and closed the tab. But curiosity got the better of me. My heart was already beating a little faster. I mean, how could it not? A live event? A real feed? It was probably some cringy scare video or a hacker screwing with people, but I had to know. I clicked the link. The page loaded slowly, like it was pulling itself out of a black hole. The screen went completely black for a few seconds, and I almost exited out, thinking the site was broken. Then a video feed appeared. The room. The first thing I noticed was the sound. A faint hum, like an old refrigerator buzzing in the background. The screen was dark except for a dim light bulb hanging from the ceiling, swaying slightly, casting weird shadows against a cracked concrete wall. There was nothing else. No furniture, no windows, just that single bulb and the shadows moving like they were alive. For a minute, I thought this was the whole event, some weird art project trying to freak people out. But then the chat popped up at the bottom of the video. Shadow 99. It's starting. User 666. Get ready. Guest 24. Proof or fake? I sat there staring at the chat, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. These people weren't messing around. They were waiting for something. Then the screen flickered, and a figure stepped into view. He was wearing a black hoodie and a plain white mask. Not like a Halloween mask either. This thing was smooth, featureless, and almost glossy, like it was made of porcelain. There were no holes for the eyes or mouth, just a blank face staring straight into the camera. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. The masked man tilted his head slightly, like he was listening for something, then stepped aside. That's when I saw her. A woman, maybe in her 20s, was dragged into the light. Her hands and feet were tied with thick rope, and a piece of cloth was stuffed in her mouth. She was terrified, her eyes wide and darting around the room as she tried to scream against the gag. The chat exploded. Shadow 99. How much tonight? User 666. Start the bidding. Bidding? My brain was spinning. I wanted to close the tab, to shut my laptop and walk away, but I couldn't. I just sat there, frozen, watching the masked man circle the woman like some kind of predator. That's when it happened. The woman stopped struggling. She turned her head toward the camera. And then she smiled. Not a desperate or hopeful smile either. It was slow, almost unnatural, spreading across her face like she knew something I didn't. She leaned closer to the camera, her wide eyes locked onto mine. Then, through the gag, she whispered something. My name. Chris. And she kept smiling. I don't think I breathed for a full minute. She said my name. My name. Chris. It wasn't loud or clear. Her voice was muffled, like someone trying to speak underwater. But I swear to God, I heard it. My entire body locked up. My fingers hovered over the mouse, trembling, as if moving it would somehow make this all worse. For a moment, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I misheard her. Maybe it wasn't my name at all. But that smile wouldn't leave my head. It was stretched too wide, showing too much teeth, like her face was being pulled into it. And then the masked man turned. His head snapped toward the camera, like he'd heard something too. He didn't say anything. He just stood there, perfectly still, as if listening. The white mask was tilted slightly down, but I could feel him looking at me, somehow. The chat kept going, like nothing happened. Shadow 99. Start the show. User 666. What's the price tonight? Guest 24. Let's go already. Meanwhile, I was sitting in my chair, drenched in sweat, my heart pounding like I'd run a marathon. I wanted to close the browser. I needed to close it. But for some reason, I couldn't. I just stared at the screen, frozen like a deer in headlights. Then the video glitched. It was quick, just a flicker, like static running across an old TV screen. But for a split second, the woman's face changed. Her wide, toothy grin became distorted. Her eyes rolled completely white, and her skin looked pale and cracked, like she'd been dead for days. Then it was gone. The camera steadied. The masked man stepped toward her. He crouched beside the chair and slowly placed a gloved hand on her shoulder. She didn't flinch. She didn't even look at him. Her gaze stayed locked on the camera, on me. And then the masked man raised a finger to his lips. Shh. I slammed my laptop shut so hard I thought I broke it. The room was silent except for the sound of my own panicked breathing. My heart was racing. My skin felt clammy. And for a second, I thought I might throw up. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at the closed laptop, waiting for something, anything, to happen. A knock at the door, a noise outside. The faint hum of the fridge sounded like a goddamn horror soundtrack. My brain was running a mile a minute. How did she know my name? The aftermath. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face. Her grin, the way her lips moved, whispering my name like she'd been waiting for me. The glitching, the masked man. None of it made sense. The next morning, Jake and Caleb came home, hungover and loud as ever. Jake immediately raided the fridge for Gatorade, while Caleb collapsed on the couch, groaning. I was still sitting at my desk, the laptop untouched since I slammed it shut. "Dude, you look like you haven't slept in years," Jake said, cracking open a Gatorade and chugging half of it. "I didn't." My voice came out hoarse. I barely recognized myself. "What were you doing all night? Studying code for the apocalypse?" Caleb called from the couch. I didn't answer. Instead, I opened the laptop and powered it back on. I had to see if the site was still there, if it had been real. Maybe I'd just hallucinated the whole thing. Maybe I'd been watching too many horror videos and my brain short-circuited. The laptop screen blinked to life. I opened Tor and checked my browser history, heart pounding with every click. When I found the link, I hesitated. My cursor hovered over it. What if it's still live? But when I clicked, nothing happened. The page didn't load. A 404 error popped up. This site no longer exists. It was gone, like it had never been there. "Yo, what's that?" Caleb asked, walking over and peering at my screen. "Nothing," I said quickly, slamming the laptop shut again. I couldn't explain it to him. I didn't want to explain it to him. How could I? The emails. That's when the emails started. Later that night, after Jake and Caleb had gone out again, I got a notification on my phone. I didn't think much of it. Probably some dumb newsletter I'd forgotten to unsubscribe from. But when I checked, my blood ran cold. The subject line said, "I see you, Chris." I stared at my phone, my hand shaking. The email was from an address I didn't recognize, just a random string of letters and numbers. I opened it, half expecting a virus or something, but the body of the email was empty, completely blank. Before I could react, another one popped up. Subject: "Why did you leave?" I didn't know what to do. I tried to block the address, but it didn't work. I refreshed my inbox, and another email appeared. Subject: "Don't look away next time." Attached to the email was a single image. I hesitated, my finger hovering over it. Part of me was screaming, "Don't open it!" But my curiosity won again. I clicked. The image loaded slowly, line by line, like an old dial-up connection. It was grainy, but I recognized it immediately. It was her, the woman from the live stream. Same chair, same concrete room, but this time she was closer to the camera. Her face filled the entire frame, smiling that same awful smile. Her eyes looked even wider, like they'd been stretched open, and scrawled across the bottom of the image in blood-red letters was one word: Chris. I dropped my phone. The screen stayed lit on the floor, her face staring back at me. Something wasn't right. I felt like I was being watched. I turned slowly, my eyes scanning the dark corners of my apartment. The blinds were closed. The door was locked. But I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was in there with me. Then I heard it. A faint hum, like the sound from the live stream. And it was coming from inside the apartment. The sound crept into the room so slowly that at first I thought I was imagining it. A faint mechanical hum, like an old fridge or a dying light bulb, but lower, almost vibrating. It didn't belong in my apartment. It was wrong. I stood frozen in my chair, my phone still on the floor with that woman's face glaring up at me. I didn't want to move. My eyes darted toward the corners of the room, then to the cracks under the doors. Nothing. Just darkness and silence, except for that hum. It was coming from the living room, My brain screamed, "Don't go in there!" But my body had already started moving. Slowly, I pushed myself up from the chair and crept toward the door to my room. Every step felt like it echoed, like the apartment had swallowed the outside world whole. No sounds of passing cars, no muffled TV noise from the neighbor upstairs. Just me, my racing heartbeat, and that awful droning hum. When I stepped into the living room, I almost tripped over a pair of shoes Caleb had left in the doorway. I swore under my breath, trying to steady myself, and then I saw it. The TV. It was on. I don't remember turning it on. In fact, I hadn't touched the remote since the day before. The screen was nothing but static, white noise hissing softly into the dark room. The hum was coming from it, low, constant, vibrating through the walls. I reached for the remote on the coffee table, my hand shaking so hard I almost dropped it. When I pressed the power button, the TV snapped off, and the hum stopped instantly. For a split second, I felt relief. I let out a shaky breath and turned to go back to my room. Then I saw my reflection. The TV screen was black now, but there was just enough light from the street outside for me to see myself staring back. Except, I wasn't alone. Behind me, in the reflection, stood a figure. A tall, shadowy figure, wearing a hood. I spun around so fast I almost fell over, but when I looked, there was nothing there. Just the empty room. My chest felt like it might explode, my breath shallow and panicked. I looked back at the TV, and the reflection was gone. Just me this time, alone. I told myself I was losing it, that it was sleep deprivation, stress, something, anything to explain what was happening. I needed air. I grabbed my keys and phone off the floor, shoved my feet into my sneakers without tying them, and practically ran out the door, the walk. It was just after midnight, and the streets outside my apartment were quiet. Too quiet. Usually there'd still be cars buzzing down the road, or drunk college students stumbling back from the bars. Not tonight. Tonight, the air was still, heavy, like the whole world was holding its breath. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed to go. I kept my head down, hands stuffed in my hoodie pockets, and walked aimlessly through the streets. My mind raced, replaying every detail of the last 24 hours. The red room, the woman, the emails, the hum. The sound was still in my ears, echoing in my head like it had burrowed itself into my brain. I kept glancing over my shoulder, convinced someone was following me, but every time I looked, the streets were empty. After about 10 minutes of walking, I ended up at the 24-hour McDonald's near campus. It was bright, busy, and familiar. Everything my apartment wasn't right now. I pushed through the doors, and the sound of frying oil, laughter, and people arguing about their orders hit me like a wave. I'd never been so happy to hear normal human noise. I ordered a coffee, mostly for something to do with my hands, and sat down at one of the corner booths where I could see the door. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and my stomach dropped. I already knew who it was from. I pulled it out and stared at the screen. New email. The subject line said, "You can't run, Chris." The message was blank again. No attachments this time. I felt my throat tighten. My eyes darted around the McDonald's, scanning the other customers. There were a few college kids at the front counter, an older man with his laptop at a nearby table, and 2 employees mopping the floor. No one was paying any attention to me. Then my phone buzzed again. Another email. Subject: "Turn around." I froze. My heart felt like it stopped beating. My hand gripped the phone so tightly I thought the screen might crack. I didn't want to turn around. I couldn't turn around, but I did. At first, nothing seemed out of place. The booths behind me were empty. The glass windows looking out onto the street reflected nothing but the neon lights outside. Then I saw it. A figure standing across the street. They were perfectly still, wearing a black hoodie with the hood pulled up and their head tilted down so I couldn't see their face. But I didn't need to. I already knew what they were wearing underneath the hood, that smooth white mask. It was the man from the live stream. He wasn't moving, just standing there on the sidewalk, facing the McDonald's, like he was waiting for me to notice him. I dropped my phone on the table and felt bile rise in my throat. My hands were clammy, my vision swimming. I don't know how long I stared at him. Seconds? Minutes? Then, as if he knew I was watching, he raised a single hand, and he waved. Not a casual wave either. It was slow, deliberate. I grabbed my phone and bolted out the side door of the McDonald's, my legs feeling like they might give out at any second. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I sprinted through alleyways, across empty streets, my sneakers slapping the pavement, until I finally reached my apartment building. I stumbled through the front door, slamming it behind me and locking every deadbolt I could. I stood there in the silence, chest heaving, waiting to hear footsteps outside, waiting for a knock, waiting for anything. But there was nothing. I crept to the window and peeked through the blinds. The street outside was empty again. No one was there. For the first time in hours, I let myself collapse onto the couch. My hands were still shaking and my head was pounding, but at least I was home. Safe. That's when my phone buzzed one last time. I looked down. Another email. Subject: "Welcome back, Chris. We'll see you soon." I sat there on my couch for what felt like hours, clutching my phone, like it was the only thing keeping me tethered to reality. I didn't dare open the email. I just stared at the screen until the light from my phone dimmed, leaving me in the dark with nothing but my heartbeat and the sound of blood rushing in my ears. I didn't know what to do. Calling the cops wasn't an option. What would I even say? "Hi, I think a woman in a live stream whispered my name, and now someone in a mask is stalking me through emails. They probably think I was high or crazy. My roommates wouldn't help either. They'd just tell me to lay off the creepy hacker crap and get some sleep. But sleep wasn't coming. Not after tonight." That's when I heard it. Tap, tap, tap. It was faint, almost quiet enough to ignore. At first, I thought it was coming from the pipes, or maybe the neighbors, but then I heard it again. 3 slow taps, this time louder. It was coming from the window. I turned my head, and my blood turned to ice. The blinds were closed, but I could see the faint outline of someone standing outside. A shadow, perfectly still, just standing there, tapping on the glass. I could feel their presence, like a weight pressing on my chest. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. My mind screamed, "Don't look," but my body had already betrayed me. Slowly, I stood up and took a step closer. My heart felt like it was trying to crawl up my throat. I reached out and gripped the edge of the blind, my hand shaking so hard I thought I might tear it. And then I yanked it open. There he was, the man in the mask. That smooth, featureless white face was inches from the glass, tilted slightly like he was studying me. Up close, the mask was even more unsettling. It was cracked, like porcelain that had been dropped and glued back together. Blackness stared out from behind it, where eyes should have been. And then he did the worst thing imaginable. He smiled. At least the mask did. A jagged line, thin as a razor, appeared across its smooth surface. Slowly, it stretched into a grotesque, impossible smile. It shouldn't have been able to move, but it did, like the mask was alive. I stumbled backward, tripping over the coffee table and landing hard on the floor. I scrambled to my feet, my body screaming at me to run, but when I looked back at the window, he was gone, just like that. The street outside was empty, silent. The camera. I didn't sleep that night. I sat curled up on the floor in my room with the lights on and my back against the wall, my laptop in front of me. I didn't want to open it again, but I needed answers, something, anything, to prove that this wasn't all in my head. I booted it up and logged back into Tor. My browser history still showed the link to the Red Room livestream, the one that was gone now. The empty 404 page was still up, but something was different this time. The little video window in the center of the page wasn't blank anymore. It was live. I stared at it, feeling my stomach drop. My webcam light flicked on. The little green glow hit me like a punch to the gut. It was streaming me. The feed on the page was a perfect, real-time image of me, sitting there in my room. The light from my laptop screen lit up my face, like I was in a spotlight. My breathing hitched as I stared at myself, wide-eyed and terrified, on the screen. The chat box underneath the video started to fill up. Shadow, 99. There he is. User, 666. Smile for us, Chris. Guest, 24. He looks scared. I froze. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. How the hell did they hack my camera? I slammed the laptop shut, but the image of myself in that video feed was burned into my mind. My pale face, my wide, frantic eyes, the chat. My phone buzzed. Another email. Subject, we're watching The Return of the Room. I don't know how, but I convinced myself it would stop if I just ignored it. I unplugged my laptop, turned off my phone, and spent the next day at the library, pretending everything was fine. I didn't go back to my apartment. I didn't talk to anyone. I just existed, trying to outrun the growing pit in my stomach. But that night, when I finally went home, everything came crashing back. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside, the faint hum already buzzing in my ears like it was waiting for me. My laptop was on. I knew I hadn't left it on. The screen was glowing from the middle of the coffee table, illuminating the dark room. My hand shook as I stepped closer. The screen showed the same Red Room live stream. The chair, the single dangling light bulb, and the woman. She was back. This time, she wasn't tied up. She was sitting calmly in the chair, hands folded in her lap, as if she'd been expecting me. Her head tilted slightly toward the camera, her dark eyes staring straight through the screen. Then she spoke. "Chris," she whispered. I staggered back, nearly tripping over my feet. My laptop's speakers weren't great, but her voice was clear. Too clear, like she was in the room with me. "We told you not to look away," she said softly, her lips stretching into that same awful, unnatural smile. The camera angle started to shift, moving closer to her face, as if someone was holding it and walking toward her. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Then the feed cut to black. Text appeared on the screen, white letters on the darkness. "We're already here." My bedroom door slammed shut behind me. The ending. You won't believe. I don't remember much after that. I ran. I don't know where I was running to, but I ran until my legs gave out and my lungs burned. When I finally looked up, I was standing outside a police station. I stumbled inside, breathless and wild-eyed, babbling something about being followed. They didn't believe me. Why would they? I sounded insane. But when I got home the next day, my laptop was gone. My phone was gone. All the emails were gone. There was no proof, no sign that anything had happened, except for one thing. Sitting on my desk was a single white mask, cracked down the center, smiling. I moved back in with my parents after that. I haven't touched a computer in months. I haven't gone back to my apartment. And every night, as I lie in bed, I hear that hum in the back of my mind. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I see her face, that smile, and I hear her voice whispering, "We'll see you soon."